the next morning
Sorry, keep
you
going. I forgot that.
have you have your event or whatever. How do you eat accordingly either that morning or that night before? Or if you're I kind of like talked about this before, like you're fasting. Do you have the proper glycogen to do a 6 a.m. and
To do
8 a.m.
your
a noon
events.
class to find like more the precision of how to plan the food consumption versus just kind of give me the data that they did.
There's a whole article on that we'll do next week to get even more into the weeds on it. But I don't want to leave you on a cliffhanger and tell you like we're gonna wait till then. So let's chat about that and get into that just a little bit, and then we'll let that segue into kind of what we went over. Um, so, so when it comes to there's a couple elements when it comes to having fuel like in the glycogen stores. The body needs time to set that up, right? So if I'm about to do a 1 p.m. workout today and I'm like, okay, I'm going to eat a banana now, like that banana is not going to have enough time to get into those glycogen stores within my skeletal muscle to use that. That does not mean eating the banana, an hour before I work out or whatever time frame is not going to upset your stomach isn't useless either, because we still are going to use blood sugar as like energy in our workouts as well. So it's not just energy coming from like the glycogen stores as far as carbohydrates, it's a combination. And I think it was the second article said that first the body's going to go to what's in the blood. We're going to use that, and then once we are maximizing that, then we're going to go to glycogen stores. So both are really important parts. So people that are going to do a fasted cardio or a fasted workout, it's not going to be a performance based workout because you're missing a part of that energy versus like we're going to use some fat, and that should be their intent if they're like doing something like that. The tricky part about the glycogen is the timing matters. So I think the average is 18 hours. So if I ate something, let's see, for my storage, my last meal today that I can access and use for my glycogen stores for a tomorrow morning workout would be lunch. So like breakfast and lunch would be my actual two most important to have those stores filled for tomorrow morning. So when we're looking at timing of the workout, it's really what you did the day before past 18 hours versus what you're doing right. Now that's not to say like dinner is not important, because then that's going to roll over into like the following day, and it's just going to like kind of keep the ball rolling in those directions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the kind of follow-up question on that would be then, so if you have a banana before a workout, and you're utilizing both the glycogen from the past 18 hours and now the blood glucose from the
Blood
banana.
sugar.
If you didn't have that banana, how would that affect the workout?
I think really you would be fine. Um, and I say that very generally speaking, because some people are very sensitive to like if they don't eat before a workout, they don't feel great. Like I'm not one of those people. Like I can not eat half a day, go work out, and I'm not going to get dizzy like the second article talked about. Getting like foggy brain from low blood sugar. Like some people are going to be a lot more sensitive to that. If that doesn't happen and they're fine, I don't think it's going to have this like huge negative effect on the workout. They're not going to probably be a peak performance. What I would be a little bit more aware of is like now like the recovery aspect of it as well. Like you had nothing there, you depleted more. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you'd be digging a hole beyond where you needed to be digging. Like you don't want to be digging that deep a hole. That would be more like my biggest concern. Buddy.
So then, like the cure for that is right after the workout,
Have something.
do banana, do an enter carb kind of drink or whatever.
Yeah, I would definitely get something in quick. And like I think all of these thoughts are also if we have a member at the gym that's eating meats, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar, at levels that support exercise and not excess body fat, they're going to be fine. It doesn't matter. Like we don't have to worry about the timing and things like that because they're going to be very, very health based. Like I think your thoughts and questions are leaning a little more toward like I want to maximize everything I can maximize. Um, so like with that thought being said, like if you have a day where you're like, oh, I missed my banana, like it's not the end of the world either. Um, it's ideal, but it's not life or death like necessary, I would say. And that's going to be like for us that cares about those metrics a lot and we want to drive it, or I'm training for a comp or I'm prepping for a comp, like they're going to matter. But like to our regular members as well, like conversations with anybody, like it's not something that it's not an additional factor they should be so stressed about. Like there's much harder things for I think like members to work with versus us that are a little more cognizant and aware of what's going on, or care I should say a little more.
Like what this conversation basically like I think does for me is it answers the question of should I eat breakfast before my morning workout? Like I think this conversation and all the kind of nuances that you've covered answer that if you do get that kind of question ever
Yeah, and I
presented.
do think like in an ideal world, yes, if it's a situation that's going to cause you a lot more stress because you're going to have to get up an hour earlier and like it has this like potential like negative effect, then I would say no, just eat immediately after. So I think it really also starts to land on like person to person. Like for me, if I'm gonna eat breakfast in the morning, it's gonna be like a torture fest. Like I don't feel starving the moment I wake up. So like I'm gonna have to wake up way earlier. I'm gonna force my food. I'm probably not gonna also like feel great. Like my stomach's gonna be a little sensitive. And if like those factors going into a workout is just a combination for probably early. So if it's something that wouldn't bother you at all, and you're like, I'm hungry, I can eat, it's not going to upset my stomach. I think your benefit is for sure there, and I would say yeah. But if any of those other factors play in, then I would say weighing on what's causing more stress too. Because if we also increase stress too much, like that has a negative effect on all these physiological factors as well. You guys ever see like in a it can be a nutrition course or like like some kind of like life coaching health thing, they have the whole pie, and the whole pie is like exercise, nutrition, stress relief, like all of these things. Like it truly is like a whole pie of things we want to do. We're like CrossFitters, we want to do good at all them. We don't necessarily want to do perfect at two or three of them and then everything else falls apart too, because then optimization is not going to be there even if we're perfect nutrition, perfect exercise. Like sleep's not there or we're very stressed, things are still, the wheels are going to still fall off the bus. That's why this is so tricky, because like all of us, 7 of us on this call, all of us optimizing all those things, it's probably going to look very different as well. And same for our members. And that's why like coaching members, you really it's a relationship and it's like a back and forth, especially with know absolutes don't work. We talked about a couple weeks ago. Any statements, questions on any of that stuff? Thoughts? Cool. I think we know that stuff too. So let's get in. Let's get into the Beyond Calories article. For me, this article was, I think, one of the most eye-opening ones I read when it came to nutrition. Like Elise said, like we know processed food is bad. It's really opened the eyes of how bad it actually is. And I jotted down 2 things: quantity and the quality. So I think a lot of people are always like cows in versus cows out. And it is a factor. And I don't think you can take that and throw it away. Like that is a piece to the pie with all this. However, if your cows in and your cows out is in a ratio that we want to be at a body composition and things like that, but all the cows in are now bad cows in and the quality is bad, then the effects of our body aren't really gonna, the adaptation of our body is not gonna be what we want it to be, right? So we need the balance of how much is going in, how much is burning. That's going to be super important. And then with the quality, the whole foods versus processed food, we need the majority whole foods, right? And just reasons being, I'm going to run through them real quick. Whole foods, we get a better balance of glucose and fructose. So a lot of the whole foods, we're going to get a lot more glucose in those ratios than we are fructose, right? We like the way our body deals with glucose, better to use as energy versus the fructose when it's more lean toward that side, hits the liver hard, it has to get stored, it damages the liver, it causes all those metabolic syndromes we don't want. And then the fiber in the whole foods, right? That's going to slow the digestion down. Even when we have whole foods that, let's say I eat a mango and there's a higher ratio of fructose than glucose, which is still more glucose, it has a chance to slowly deal with it, not having this floodgate like if I ate a bag of chips or cookies, like anything like that. I think the floodgate thought is like where the brain needs to be as far as like understanding this stuff. When we have the process, our body has to deal with all 100 grams of carbs that we ate right now. Versus if I ate 100 grams of carbs and it was fruit, vegetables, a potato, stuff like that, I don't have to deal with 100 right now. I can deal with, this is not accurate, but I can deal with 20 now, and then 20 in a little bit, 20 in a little bit, dealing with those 100. So it's just much easier for our body to regulate. And then when we talk about blood sugar and being sustained and not having those crashes, like that's why we don't typically like have that big crash, that afternoon crash. Like our coworkers that might have gone to Applebee's for lunch, right? You guys know what I mean by that, like afternoon crash. You get the sugar spike, deal with it all, comes down. So to Justin's point about eating and timing and working out, when we're talking about that too, our normal day-to-day person, they're not going to get to the point where they're like, I don't feel like going to the gym when they get off work, and then they skip it, they go home, and it becomes a snowball effect. They'll feel like their energy, because of those blood sugar levels, they're stabilized. They'll be more cruising through the day, I would say. The other thing, the article talks about, our brains are still operating like it's thousands of years ago, except we don't have to go hunt for our food. We don't have to go, gather berries and find a fruit tree and things like that. We can just Uber Eats now, or go to the grocery store, buy whatever we want. So the accessibility of all this, adding with your brain goes, ooh, sugar, like savory, so savory and sweet, so sugar and fat. Let's eat as much of that as we can because our brain is still operating primally, and it doesn't know when we're going to get another really good kill if we're hunting, or it doesn't know when we're going to come across this berry bush and I can just eat every berry on the berry bush. It might be days and days or potentially weeks before I get that. So it's like eat as much as you can, right? It's basically like gorging. So primarily our brain says eat all this processed food, go to town, have a good time. You then get a dopamine response, right? That's why we love to go out to eat and have dinner at restaurants. You get the dopamine response. Your brain's like, hell yeah, good job. That felt good. Really, really happy. And then the snowball of what happens with insulin resistance, the fat accumulation. He talked about in a little Instagram tag. If you didn't get a chance to watch that, it pulls up his Instagram video. He talks about it. He talks about the leptin receptors getting messed up. So then your brain doesn't know that you're ever satisfied. So now you have this combination of your brain saying eat more sugar and sweet because that's what it's designed to do. You have unlimited accessibility to it, whether you want to go to the grocery store or order Uber Eats. You get a reward system every time you have it, and a dopamine response. And then because your brain's never being told that it has enough energy and it's satisfied because of the hormone leptin, it's like have more because we don't have enough energy. And because we don't have enough energy, continue to eat, and also let's not do much. Let's not exercise. Let's not work out because I don't know that we have enough to survive. So it goes into preservation process. It goes into that preservation mode. you're going to get fatter, you're going to hold fat. So it's like you can see how this combination in this wave happens when we're having these processed foods. And it's like we're literally fighting how we're designed to feel, think, want. We're like fighting that whole thing because grocery stores and Uber Eats got developed way faster than our brain. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Our brain evolved. So I think when like I make the statement that this article is very eye opening to me, those are really the reasons why I'm just like, oh shit, like you're really really fighting an uphill battle to not have these things. Have you guys ever like gone through a challenge or just like eaten? When I say clean, I mean like so clean that you don't even have like a cheat meal on Saturday. You get past like 2 or 3 weeks, and then like all the bad things like they don't even sound appetizing anymore. And like a dessert that sounds gross. Like that's like the opposite end of this, where you've left that cycle and you're I would say like operating a little more optimally as far as that goes. You have a statement, Justin? I saw you moving forward. No, just getting phone. Questions, statements on any of that? There's
Like,
something. Go
I
ahead.
think I don't know. I think there's a this same article, but like make it bigger. I don't know if it's in CrossFit or is in Broken Science by Jardina, and it goes even deeper about like all this stuff about calories in, calories out, and I think it's called calories in, calories out. And what? How is that?
How it's flawed.
But
I think it's like a cows in, cows out, and like how it's kind of a flawed system.
yeah, yeah, I think it goes like even deeper and kind of like conspiracy with actually information and how
Well, and
the pyramid of the pyramid was wrong and
like the
like
food pyramid, not the
yeah
CrossFit pyramid.
yeah the food pyramid was wrong and how everything is it goes way deeper in the history and how everything came to
Well,
this point.
I think it's a CrossFit. I think I know what article you're talking about. If you come across it, let me send it over to me and I'll put it in our app. But you're spot on. Like he even touches on this in that, and I think it's an Instagram post. If you click on it, you know how a lot of industry push the calories in versus calories out really hard, because if you say that's the only equation to this problem, then you're saying like I can have a Coke as long as I have my Coca-Cola inside of my window of those cows in versus cows out. So it really gave the permission to these companies that are producing
Yeah,
those things that this is fine to have. It's
yeah.
not going to hurt
Now
you
that
as
you
long as you
say
have too much.
now that you say Coca-Cola, I remember that they also point the fact that they were doing this um I don't know what's the name of the campaign, but ends up being like if you get fat, it's because you are not working out. Mainly that was like that was the message. And it's like making the people be they are responsible if you are getting fat, like taking in
It's
actually the
and
sugar
it's
from.
and it's pointing the finger at every other situation except that like our product is a part of this problem, because they can't say that because then you don't want to buy the product. And I think they also fully know that you know those processed things are very addictive. Like I don't open a bag of chips and eat a serving of chips and be satiated at all. No, I go through the whole thing. And that's also part of like the fiber problem. Fiber makes me feel satiated and makes me feel full, and a lot of these products don't have much of it. I can eat the whole bag of cookies and be. I mean, I'm still hungry, or I'm hungry very very quickly after doing it. So it's like you can really see like how our brain is operating, and then plus all that marketing and misinformation that's happened, and we know that stuff has happened. How it's like created this hurricane, in our modern society. That's a really good point that you bring up there. I didn't think of that, jotting this stuff down, but it's definitely part of it.
I think
Um,
it's getting better now. I think that concept has been getting debunked a
I
fair
think
amount
people are
as of
learning.
recently. Like there was that recent documentary with a twin study on Netflix
Yeah.
It's all about nutrition as well. But you can just see the side by side with their different diets and how it affected them physiologically, cognitively.
And
But
and
I think it's
and it,
pretty much the rule of thumb of it's like calories determine weight, but the type of calorie can determine your health.
that's a really good way to put it. When I took EC's course, that was kind of what she said too. She was like, cows in versus cows out may determine how much you weigh, but all the other factors of quality are going to determine how your body's functioning and your aesthetics and all of these other things. She was like, you have to do both. Um, Also, too, I think with social media now, even though social media brings this huge cloud of like people's opinions and like information that, whether it is planned or is not planned, and it's not always 100% accurate information. It brings this transparency of, or I shouldn't say transparency. It brings a delivery system to everybody on these things that are bad and these things that are good. And when I say like sometimes it's skewed, like you're gonna get somebody that is like you should only eat carnivore, and you're gonna get the flip side that is like you should only be vegan and eat this, and there's a million other ones that go along with it too. But I think social media and the spread of that is teaching the average person that like stuff like processed foods and TV dinners are not good. Like, my grandmother thought TV dinners were amazing for you. She's like, oh, it's meat, it's a vegetable and rice or whatever it was, but had no idea about all the other stuff, the added sugar that was in it, the seed oils that were in it. Like that wasn't even thought of. So I think stuff like that has come to light because of social media, and then because of stuff like broken science, CrossFit growing, and all this stuff as well. EC Sinkowski, the lady that was in the video last week, she does something that I think is a pretty interesting, cool way to handle it. That I never really thought of. When it's like a Saturday, or she's gonna do a cheat meal, or she's gonna have something she wants, she eats it with like no other normal stuff that she eats in her diet. So like she'll put pictures on her Instagram, and it'll be like this, this beer and a cookie, but then she's eating it with like some fruit, or she'll have like a vegetable and a nice cut of meat. So it's like instead of going totally off the rails, she has it in luau with her normal diet that she's having, so it doesn't get overblown. And I really personally like that a lot, because if you're eating, a meat and vegetable for dinner, that's going to be pretty tasty, and you're not going to overdo like the bad stuff. Like you're going to get full, and you're going to kind of get content because you're mixing it with the good stuff. And then just from like the physiological point of view, she's also eating it with the fiber, and she is slowing down that process versus just like absolutely dumping it. So that's a nice trick that if you ever want a cheat meal and you don't want to totally go off the rail, and it's not like a full blown vacation situation, that you can manipulate. So simple, but something I, funny enough, never personally thought of. That why don't I have good and bad together? Let's talk insulin and blood sugar. So I like this one because I think it sets up really nicely to show the importance of what we just talked about in the other article, that like having the excess, carbohydrates, especially the processed ones, how detrimental they can be, to our bodies, especially when we talk about, type 2 diabetics. People get hyperinsulinemia, and the rate of insulin versus like the rate they clear is often, and they develop, high blood pressure, obesity, type 2 diabetes. Like these are all things we know, and it's like a snowball effect that happens. They become more insulin resistant, all that stuff. It also shows, though, how important carbohydrates can be, especially good ones. So I think now, we're in this fad of like carbs are bad for you. And then I know you guys have dealt with this in the gym, that we have members that are like, I don't want to eat carbs. Like they're just like more keto based, because they are under the notion that carbs are bad. But then when we look at, especially with our exercise and our activity level, that energy system that's phosphoprotein uses ATP, it needs glucose. So our explosivity is going to start to go away, and that's that 1 minute max effort. That's that 10-second sprint effort. So we start to lose that ability because it needs glucose to regenerate. And then the insulin in our body helps us pull and store glycogen. We know we need that, especially for CrossFit. It helps protein synthesis. So when we're talking about just like that recovery factor, rebuilding, getting stronger, if we're not eating carbs and we're not having insulin do its job, we miss I won't say we miss that, but we don't optimize that. Cell growth, it helps. I already talked about the ATP, and then when we are talking about like leaning out, it helps the fatty acid synthesis too. So the right quality and the right quantity helps us lose weight. I had to actually look that up online to understand it a little bit better. It's a little complex, but it's like kind of like a 4-step process of losing body fat that insulin also can help deal with. And then obviously like the flip side of the bad stuff that we talk about, we have too much all the time, we become resistant. Our pancreas needs to secrete more, eventually it gets to the point where it can't secrete enough. So then we get to hyper, and it's just like, and it starts to snowball from there. So going back to our original statement, cows in versus cows out's important. Quality is very important. Did you guys have any thoughts just like related to any of that stuff, or that second more like complex article?
I didn't see it in the articles, but I guess the next step from here would be, okay, we know we need this type of food. Now, how do we determine best which of the macros do you want to, and how do you play with that? Now that we determine this is the food source you want.
So like we know what we want to eat. We need to now figure out how much to eat.
Yeah.
That that's gonna be it's gonna be a forever changing number for every one of us, right? So that's gonna be one that there's some like baseline things we can do. I put in last week on Tuesday. I'll recopy it for Cayman as well, so you can see it. I put in the journal article 21, and that's to find your zone blocks. Zone blocks is typically going to start somebody more for like a healthy, like health related baseline. So like everybody on this call that's hammering away at CrossFit, it would be fine to do. It's not going to be necessarily like a performance number. So you would definitely probably start adding blocks to that. But at least it gives you this starting point, and then you start to work from a starting point. There's also another equation that you can use, and it's like a times 12 multiplier. And basically the way you would do that is you take whatever someone's optimal, I would say optimal, whatever their desired body weight is going to be. So if someone wants to lose weight and I say I want to weigh 195 pounds, that would be my number to multiply by 12. Let's say I want to gain weight, then I would take that gain weight number and multiply by 12. 12 is also the baseline number. 12 is a baseline for someone that's like going to exercise in the gym, not for someone that's going to be doing like 2-a-days. Or if I have someone that's exercising in the gym, but they're a construction worker and they're putting in 10 hours of manual labor, like I'm going to need to bump that 12 to a 13 to be a 14. I don't know that answer until we do it and we like rock it out and like play with that for a little bit and see how the body responds, see how energy levels are, things like that. So Justin, after the call, and if any of you guys want to do it, text me on the side, and I'll like put the equation and kind of work it through. I'll do it for zone and for the 12. It takes me 2 seconds, so you can see how I work that and see how I break it down. Basically, you do the multiplier. So if I weigh 200 pounds, it'll be 200 times 12. That's going to give me a number. That number is going to be my calories. And then from my calories, I would probably start with a 40-30-30 split. So I would divide, or I would times 40% times, let's just say the number is 1,000 to be really simple. That's not enough food to use 1,000. But I would do 40% times 1,000. That would give me 400 calories of carbohydrates. I would divide that by the calories in the gram per carb, and that would be my carb number. So it's just literally math and breaking it down. So it's I would just call it an educated guess. And then from that educated guess, constant tweaking on what's going on. It's something, sometimes things change. Sometimes goals change. Sometimes, someone goes from on their feet moving around job all day to all of a sudden they're sitting at a desk all day. Like all of those things do become a factor. Very twitchy people. So like you ever sit by somebody and they're just constantly bouncing their knee or they never stop moving. Like you can even look at that to kind of gauge, am I going to need to bump this up or stuff like that too. So try to think about all the angles that come into play. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and for protein, I feel like the formula is pretty like well known, like
Protein's the
gram,
easiest one for sure.
yeah, gram per pound kind of thing. It's the carbs. It's like trying to figure out and understanding, like you were saying, like when you have a change in your lifestyle, or whatever. Like how do you titrate
Do I
that?
go up? Do I go down? Yeah, and I think part of that too is also listening to how you're feeling. Like how has the last month of training felt? Have I been, fairly invigorated every day, or am I like absolutely pulling teeth to even get into the gym, and then my workouts are bombing on top of it? Like all of that stuff, to pay attention to. And then it gets interesting too, like you say, like for protein, gram, per body weight that can also get manipulated a little bit. Like if I have someone that is more potentially more like sensitive for insulin and they're holding a lot of belly fat, they're very round, then I may actually give them slightly more than a gram or up to a gram depending on what they've been doing, because I'm going to take more calories of like protein and fat than I do a carb, because I want to get their sensitivity down maybe for insulin potentially. Versus like flip side, if I don't necessarily want someone to gain weight, then I don't have to do an exact like gram per pound when it comes to protein. I could do maybe like 80%. It's still going to be enough protein to have them build, lean mass and be productive. But then I could take those extra calories that I took out of protein and insert them in carbs. Like, so you can have this manipulation. It doesn't always have to be a perfect 40-30-30, depending on what makes the person feel better or not. I have no backing for this, but it's just kind of like my own thoughts. I do think like your heritage and like where you come from and like what has, your last 200-300 years of your family and in your DNA been eating, I think that potentially could have an effect as well. Someone that their whole heritage is from Siberia is going to eat very, very different than someone that their heritage is from the Caribbean. And that's just my own personal thoughts and exploration in my own head. And there did used to be a diet that was kind of based on that, but I don't know anything about it. So that's why I think some people are gonna do better on high protein, high fat, and less carb diet, and some people are gonna do better on higher carb diet. And like you go, why? Maybe that's a factor inside of it as well. So I like to try to occasionally play with that, depending if I'm having a hard time figuring out like why someone's feeling good, bad, stuff like that too. But yeah, any of you guys, if you want to text me, you guys have my number in the group chat. Text me on the side. It doesn't have to be WhatsApp. And I'll play with some numbers and just like help you with the baseline to start to just find that path. One other thought I have is CrossFit uses zone in the measuring system for zone because it's a really good baseline of health, like I talked about, but they also do it to teach people how to weigh and measure. They the block system of having their protein, carb, fat, and like you're going to do 4 blocks. That's just to help people get the math down to it. So like it doesn't have to be like a perfect block either. If you're pretty well versed in it, like you can kind of skip the zone block thing and just let it rip as well. I'll also text a application I really, really like that's very user friendly. You can customize it. And I think it works better than MyFitnessPal. So I'll text that in the group as well if you guys want to play with it. What else do you guys have? Anything?
So that I wanted to say that like someone that wants to start doing their journey through nutrition, I wouldn't discourage them either to count calories. Like that's a good start. Like okay, you're
I wouldn't weigh
aware.
and measure.
I would I'm glad that you're aware how many calories you are having like that. And the same thing, like when you're already doing the nutrition, the zone, like would be like a good way to start also. Like, hey, I know how much of my protein I have, how much of that.
And I think too, everyone's potentially starting their journey at different spots. So like, are they in elementary school? Are they in middle school? Are they high school? Are they in college? Like elementary school would be like, hey, let's just eat some vegetables a couple times a day. You know, they just need to be start to push into the direction. And like we're gonna selectively ignore like how much they're necessarily eating, what else are they eating. We're just gonna start to instill one good habit at a time. Because if you try to go cold turkey and you try to take the elementary students to college, the wheels are falling off the bus. It ain't gonna happen. Like maybe they get through a couple days, but it's just they don't have that capability yet. So if someone's starting off like real raw, do one thing like precision nutrition, their uh, their initial thing for people is just I want you to go to the store and buy any multivitamin that you want, and you're going to start taking a multivitamin daily. And all it's doing is he's giving them a very easy attainable habit, and they start to execute one habit, and then he starts to just stack on top of it. Versus if like it's somebody on this call, you know, you guys can verse out meats, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, and that whole line. You know what should be going in, and the fact that you're here listening to this, I know you're at least semi-conscious about it. So maybe we start with weighing one macro. That the ET does that. She starts with just vegetables, and then she goes, "We're only going to track protein. Don't worry about the carbs and fat." She literally just does one thing. So you don't have to all necessarily go from just like only working on quality to only doing like weight measuring everything. You can have a blend. You can have like a couple habits instilled, and then think, "Hey, I only need you to measure protein." And then once they're just grooving on that, and be like, "Okay, now we're going to start to measure the other stuff too." So it's like you can train and build into that process as well. Um,
The
so I
other thing
really
that I
think
wanted to say is that Dave Castro does these weekly things, and on this one that it was yesterday, I guess. Someone asked him like, why do you keep teaching zone two and in the level one? Like this girl was saying that she took the level one after years and they are still teaching them. And he said, actually, if you realize there's a difference, we don't pay that much we don't teach them as deep as we used to teach them before. And apparently they in the level one, they are sharing like before, I don't know, Justin, you just took it, like before they actually gave you all the blocks and all these chart and everything. And apparently nowadays they are sharing other informations on nutrition. Like it's a good way to start, but then you will have to dig in
and I,
even
and
deeper.
I do think that was the original intent was like a good way to start and like get people moving on it. Um, not to like put all the eggs in the zone basket. Does that make sense? I had that realization too. Like I used to do everybody on zone, and it was like do or die by zone. And then I realized I'm like, this doesn't necessarily work for anybody. It's just to educate us, to get us moving in the directions we need to go. We spent a very long time when I did it in my level one, but that was over 10 years ago now. So, I mean, there was like people were still arguing and taking cigarette breaks back then.
I think it's nice, but what's even easier is like MyFitnessPal or one of these apps that make it easy to track. Like I feel like that makes it so you can just replace the zone two, make more precise about it.
And, and that's a really good point. You go back to 2010. I don't even know if MyFitnessPal or any of those apps exist. Like I didn't have a smartphone. I had a flip phone that had old school snake on it. Like that was mind blowing technology back then. We didn't have apps. So that's a really, really good point of like the block and like that prescription helping people be able to count their macros versus now we just if I have a barcode, I just gotta go beep and that's good. You know, that's a really, really good observation and thought. Um, and I do think it's it's such a hard thing. The last like thought I have for today is it's not as easy as just like eating good and or telling somebody this is what you should eat. It gets so much more than the needs of like you have to look at everything that's happening. Like, are they having to get up and go to work at 4:30 a.m. and are they working all day and they're getting home at 8:30, 9 p.m. type things after the gym? Like we know that person has to do some extraordinary planning or have someone assisting them like a meal prep or someone else cooking for them to be successful. We know there's not going to be success into them cooking breakfast every morning and cooking dinner every night. So like looking at how each person's life is structured and what do they need to do as far as a prep and planning purpose on how to achieve that. And I think sometimes coaches miss that. They go, well, I cook breakfast every day. And I'm like, yeah, you coach morning class 2 times a week. And other than that, you get to have your coffee, stretch, and read a book. So we have to consider everyone's schedule and how they're going to get to where we need them to go with all this information and get them to execute that well. I saw a thing a long time ago and it was like, you have like different types of personalities and they had names for them. I don't remember what it was, but like you had the chef. The chef was the person that doesn't mind cooking. They find a little bit of enjoyment in it. They're the person that looks at recipes and goes, ooh, I want to make that. The chef, even though they like cooking, do they have the time to cook? And then if they do have time to cook, maybe that time to cook is only on Sunday. So then if you're working with a chef, like their execution has to happen Sunday. And if it doesn't, like what are their fallbacks? Like I used to have ice age meals in the freezer. So if I had a weekend that I was out of town or something like that, I knew I had these meals ready to go. Or some people like to just freeze stuff, that they've made and they make extra. So if things fall through, they have these backup plans. And then they had, I don't remember the other name, but they had a name for another person. That was the person that is very like will cook, but they're kind of unwilling. They don't find it fun. They don't find it enjoyable. They're probably going to cook sometimes, but they're not going to be doing it every week. That was a person that you would be like, hey, different kinds of like good pre-made foods. So, what's the name of one? Can't remember now. But like Ice Age meals, that's a pre-made food or trifecta, like those types of companies even though they may be slightly more expensive, may be the route that that person should highly consider because they're going to have quality food, whole food, and it's going to be very available when they need it to be available. That may be the very busy person. And then the other thing to think about with that is, even though it's going to be more expensive than going to the grocery store and buying your groceries, you also have to say how much more expensive is it if I'm just buying dinner every night. Even though I'm only spending 20 a night, 20 still more than $12 a meal, even though I have to spend that in one shot to buy 8 meals. So like thinking about those factors and all of those things that are going into it, I think is a really important part in our own nutrition, but also especially when we start to help others, helping them identify what may work good for them. And it's like I said, there's things that I didn't realize, like when EC was eating a cookie with vegetables. I was like, what? That's so weird, but it also makes so much sense. So sometimes it's just you're shining some light on situations people need light to be shined because they're just not thinking of it either, even though it may seem like common sense to us. Does that all make sense? I think being honest, I'm guilty of this, being honest with myself, what type of person I am, and what I need to do for my success as far as that goes too. It's the same thing for working on. I think that wraps up all my thoughts for the day. You guys have anything else before we wrap this one up? Cool. I've got a good amount of videos, but still keep sending them because I'll just keep uploading them and we'll get to them whether we get to them Thursday or not. And I will see you guys Thursday then.
these videos that you acquire, are they just of any movements, or are they a particular topic?
Anything you want to see. Occasionally we'll like talk about something on like this call today, or we'll get on a subject. Um, so like that'll happen, but for the most part, if there's just anything, you know, you want to work on and you feel off with, or a movement that's really tough for you or someone else, just literally send it on through. If it's any kind of movement, I'm good with it. Even if it's a stretch, to be honest. Um, as boring as stuff like that is, I think that's still good for us to understand. And we got Justin on this call, so that stuff would
Yeah, that
always
was
be
my time
good.
to shine. What are you doing, man?
Yeah, you're taking that one over. Yeah, literally anything. It could be a warm up movement, because it can just open thoughts and doors and stuff like that. So yeah, send it on over. You're in the WhatsApp group, right? Okay, perfect. Yeah, you can send it there, and I'll get it uploaded for y'all. All right, guys. I will see you guys Thursday.
See you guys later. Have a good week.
See y'all.